what's going on? Okay, it looks like I'm recording. Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm recording. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this more often. Uh, I used to do some, I guess they weren't even live streams. What was it? Anyway, I used to do some like YouTube videos, small YouTube videos as I was walking to work. A lot has changed since then. I got a couple of different jobs. The last one I did was about a book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, um, by Cal Newport. And so I like talking about books. I like books in general. I think there's a lot of good lessons in there, but I like talking about books. Hopefully, it makes me more comfortable just talking in front of a camera. Um, the most recent book or like the last book that I was rereading, it's a book I've read a whole bunch of times before. It's a book called Linchpin uh, by Seth Godin. He wrote, Seth Godin wrote a book. He's actually written a whole bunch of books. They're all really good, at least the ones that I've read. A couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago or more even, he wrote a book called Purple Cow, and it was a marketing book. And the idea behind Purple Cow was, as a company, you want to market stuff that is actually remarkable. So if you're driving down and you see a farm, if you're driving down the side of the road and you see a farm, and you see some cows, a bunch of like white and black or like brown cows or something, nothing special. It's just a farm. But if you see a purple cow, that's something you're going to tell your friends. That's remarkable. And so he says the human form of that is a linchpin. So obviously a linchpin is that piece of the machine that's important. It's like that piece of the wheel that if you pulled out that pin, the rest of the wheel falls apart. So it's that piece of the machine that's so important that the rest of the machine wouldn't work without it. So he says your goal should be to try to be that person in your company or in whatever thing you're doing. And I don't think he makes this connection in the book, but I kind of like it. As programmers, a lot of people don't want to just be a code monkey, just somebody who just does whatever, right? Like who just does whatever the boss tells them. Or just in general company speak, people say they don't want to just be another cog in the machine. And so, yeah, like the goal should be don't be a cog, be a linchpin. And part of the reason I like this book is kind of it it pushes back against it. It seems like there's a it's kind of like this general attitude of when you get a job, uh, like don't do extra work. They're trying, like whoever they are, the bosses are trying to scam you or take advantage of you or whatever. And so don't let them. Like it doesn't like that attitude that I see let's say other YouTubers talk about is that it is this struggle between you and the company doesn't care about you, which might be true. Actually, that part might be true. So if the company doesn't care about you, why should you do anything for them? And Linchpin kind of has that opposite attitude, and that's my personal attitude as well. And so the book is, in order to be actually, so first of all, I used to say two things to my students, and one is related to the first book I talked about. So I would say, so the first book I talked about was So Good They Can't Ignore You. I would say two things. Try to become really, really good. So again, so good they can't ignore you, and try to become really, really helpful. And that's where I think linchpin comes in. In order to be a linchpin, he says, like he kind of used kind of like more like colorful language. Like he says, become an artist. Like an artist isn't just somebody who paints. An artist is somebody who comes up with unique solutions to challenges. And he says, give gifts. So don't just like there's a whole bunch. And so what he means by give gifts is don't just do that bare minimum. Anything extra. So you have your job, which is, let's say you're an Android developer and you're working on this particular task, um, whatever, like you're fixing this bug. So don't just do that job. He says give gifts. Try to figure out how you can improve the architecture, even though it might take longer. Try to figure out how you can uh, build, let's say, scripts. I've done this at other jobs. Maybe you can build some bash scripts that actually make things much easier for you and your team. Let's say like even just the mobile team, like you could build some scripts that imports things. Maybe that wasn't a task that was ever given to you. You can build some scripts that will help import some, uh, I don't know, I don't have any good examples. Well, actually, I do have a good example, even though I think this was a task. I had a buddy who they had to do some internationalization on their project, and that just means they had to make it so their app didn't just work in English; they had to work in multiple languages. So they had these language files, and they were kind of in the wrong format. And the manual job would have been to just like they had to convert these language files from into just the language, just the strings themselves, into something that could be processed by their app. And so he took this extra step of learning. I think he was learning Python. He realized, hey, I can do this. I, I can do this simple job. All right, let me break it down. He was like, I could do this simple job. It takes no brain to convert these files over to this other format, and it's going to be 2 weeks of work. I'm going to get paid no matter what. So why do extra? So you could just take the attitude of, this is what they're paying me for. I'm going to come in for 8 hours. If they want me to convert these stupid files, I'm going to convert them. Instead, he learned Python. Uh, he's obviously a good programmer already, but he looked at Python. He realized, how can I do this quickly? He built a script that would uh, convert these files into the correct format, and he saved the company weeks of work. Again, he didn't need to do that, and for him, that just means, instead of doing that easy job for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or I don't know how long it was going to take, now he has to move on to more difficult tasks. At my current job, I have a coworker who is constantly doing this. A lot of times as a mobile developer, you might need some API work done. And if you don't know API, if you don't know anything about how to do back-end work, maybe you're just stuck there. You just sit there. And so I was spending time learning Laravel, but I'm still not that good at it. The iOS guy is in the exact same boat. He was learning Laravel, but not an expert at it. And so instead of just sitting for the next 3 weeks with nothing to do because we need back-end work done, he took it upon himself to just jump into the code and start getting stuff done. And now he's learning it more and more. So that's kind of like, again, he's solving these interesting problems, and in a way, he's being an artist because he's solving these interesting problems, and he's giving gifts. It does happen to be giving gifts to the company, but it's helping out all of the individual employees as we're getting more, because of that, we're able to get out more features, so we're actually helping our users as well. And maybe you think that's kind of dumb, or maybe some people think that attitude is kind of dumb, but, and this is actually in the book, I think there's no other option. Sitting around doing nothing seems like a recipe for getting fired, right? If you just do that average work and you just say, like, that's not my job, or there was nothing I can do, and maybe legitimately there's nothing you can do, right? But I'm going to talk about that as well. Maybe there's actually nothing that you know how to do because you don't know anything about backend, and it's such a learning curve at that point. And that's like a little bit, maybe that's a different situation. But if you can, try to jump in and try to do that extra work. If you don't, like I said, that seems like a recipe for getting fired. You might think, well, I'm a valuable programmer and they pay me X amount of dollars to work these 8 hours. That's all I'm going to do. You are the first person to get fired when when the company falls under hard times. Okay. Yeah, you also become, like, if you're average, you're easy to fire or you're easy to replace. And you might think that you're not, and maybe you're not 100% right now because you have that one skill that's really hard to find, but somebody else is going to have that. Like the company will find somebody else who can have that attitude. So that's the negatives of doing it that way. But the positives, and he talks about this in the book, is when you give gifts, when you do that kind of stuff, you actually benefit more than the receiver. And I 100% believe this. my company is paying me, again, X amount of dollars, and I'm making them millions of dollars. And the Android app, maybe helps bring in extra customers. You're able to purchase stuff on Android and mobile in general, so that maybe they're making millions of dollars off of the work that I'm doing. So that seems not fair. The fact is, I'm also making, this is the way I look at it, I'm also making millions of dollars off of that. And the reason I think that is because the stuff that I'm gaining experience, especially early in your career. That experience that you're gaining is valuable. It's going to help you over the next 60 years of your career, or whatever, 40 years of your life, as you're earning money. And you're going to be networking, so you're going to be proving to your coworkers that, hey, this guy or this girl is a good programmer. They're a solid person. They're going to try to get stuff done instead of just throwing their hands up. Right? Nobody really wants to work, especially when stuff starts getting difficult. Nobody really wants to work with the person who just says, "Well, I'm going home early. Good luck with your job." So again, maybe you don't care, but your coworkers might be also responsible for getting you hired at the next company you want to work at, right? They may end up being the gatekeeper at your next job. If you live in a city, the programming community, like whatever city, is a small community. So there's chances are, if you're looking for a new job, somebody somebody you've worked with before might work at that job, especially if you have been a programmer or whatever, if you've been in your field or your career for more than 5 or 6 years in the same city. Lots of people move around to the different companies, and so like you're by not doing the work, by not trying to go that extra mile, you're hurting yourself, because you might not, like, your coworkers might not think highly of you, and they might tell the hiring manager, no, that person isn't worth hiring. But again, on the other side, the positive side is, if you are that person who tries to do extra, who besides just doing Android also does iOS and also tries to do some back end, right? People are going to notice that, and you might, again, that hiring manager might, or like whatever, your coworkers that move to that other company, they might say like, oh, definitely hire Matt because he's willing to work, like he's a good worker, he's a really smart guy, right? And so again, that's a benefit. But also, so by doing that extra work, you're gaining experience, you're gaining knowledge, and that's valuable across your entire career. I've been saying this for a long time. If you look back at my old videos, if this company won't pay you more, the next company will. And maybe that's not 100% correct, but I definitely see that in the programming community. When I was working at actually the last 2 jobs, that is exactly what happened. For whatever reasons, I quit. Like at one company, I was curious if I was getting paid low, so I was curious if I could get another job somewhere else. And I was hoping to get a raise after my review, and so I was curious. I went and I looked. I put out my resume to see if I can get a new job, and because this company, after my review, the company I was at after my review didn't want to give me a raise. So I went and I looked. Oh, maybe I'm not more valuable. Maybe I'm not as valuable as I think I am. I immediately got an offer. So of course, what are you going to do if you get a job offer that's like 20% higher? You're gonna take it. And so I worked hard at that first company. I was going in weekends, and they didn't feel like, for whatever reason, they didn't feel like I was worth that raise. I looked in the market, and as it turns out, I was. Second company, the reason I quit was because I didn't feel like I was learning. There wasn't a whole lot of learning or even work there. And we can talk about maybe different reasons to quit at a different time. But so I did the same thing though. It's like I didn't feel like at that company there was enough challenges or enough growth. And after 6 months, I had hardly done anything, and not like I wasn't trying to, but I did the same thing. I reached out, I put myself out in the market, and I was able to get more money. So as you build up the experience, you can get more money, uh, and that compounds over the years. And but then besides that, not it's not just about money, but also this is back to the book. He says as your skills increase, the like again like people will pay you more, but also the projects that you work on, like you get to pick and choose your projects more. And so like Linus Torvalds, I'm gonna mess up his name, the guy who created Linux, right? He's built enough projects. He doesn't have to put out a resume. Like I mean, he probably just works on his own projects anyway. But that's a perfect example, right? Like he's so well known that people are going to pay him, and he probably gets to collaborate with whoever he wants. He gets to work on whatever projects he wants, and he's not worried about being fired. He's probably not worried about money at all, even though the projects that he's made, like the biggest ones that he's made, are all free. He made Linux, that's free. Linux kernel, free. Git is free. So these are just open source projects. But I don't know his exact history, but I'm sure he gets to pick and choose his projects. And it's going to be true about the jobs that you get, or the jobs that I get as well. The first company I got, that I was working at when I first moved to Vegas, it was um, it was kind of working on some like state official documents, like business documents, and it wasn't super exciting for me. I was excited because I was trying to treat it like I was helping entrepreneurs, but the job itself wasn't that exciting. Code base wasn't that exciting. But again, as you build up those skills, you're able to kind of look around. And the job that I'm working on now, it is in the health and fitness industry. I like health and fitness, even if it doesn't always look like it. So I get to work on more interesting projects, and I'm working with some really great programmers. So I get to collaborate more, and work is fun. So giving gifts, doing that extra is going to benefit you more than it's even benefiting the receiver. Giving those gifts is going to benefit you more than the receiver, even if that company makes $1 million. It's not just about the money. So he also mentions strive to be more than just average. So average is easy to fire, easy to replace. I kind of mentioned that. And so as you are, like, again, you might want to be working on these cool projects. There might be a company like Microsoft or Apple or Twitter that you really want to work for. And so he says, Google yourself. So are you showing up? Like sometimes like a resume isn't going to be enough. Google yourself, and like, are you showing up in that search at all? How can you make yourself rank higher? So do interesting work, or work, yeah, like basically do interesting work and build up not necessarily your resume, but build up your Google search results. So for example, if you have a blog about your industry, so like if you're doing Android, if you have a blog about Android programming, uh, like that doing that kind of stuff is going to make you more likely, like it's going to increase your connections basically, right? uh, so for example, and that's exactly why these I'm trying to do these like YouTube videos. That's why we're making our podcast and our website, because we're trying to get our own like, I guess, linchpin status or artist status up, right? And so like by giving out gifts, the gift of a blog or the gift of like a YouTube video, hopefully that starts spreading. And then when there's more interesting projects, maybe personal projects or whatever, then you have the opportunity to take those. Let's see what else. I kind of mentioned it before, but obviously don't say that's not my job. Yeah, I mentioned that. And so as a programmer, I would say like this is the job. Whenever people say that's not my job, like I'm an Android programmer, and it's not my job to get this whatever back end piece done. I don't know. It is hard because there's obviously different roles, but if you say like this thing isn't my job, like why am I debugging this other person's code, or your direct Android teammate isn't getting this piece done, I would say that is your job. Your job is to get stuff done. In order to be really helpful, in order to be a linchpin, you should be leaning in. You should be trying to make stuff happen. So even if that means learn and explore if you can't actually fix it, like if it's a back end issue, but don't just sit there. If your teammate, like let's say a direct teammate, like an Android teammate, isn't able to get stuff done, offer help. Maybe actually, do the work for them. Don't worry about who gets the credit for that work. Just help them out. Now you've gained experience. Hopefully, you've made a good network connection with that teammate, and that benefits you more than the opposite, basically. Let's see. I have some other notes where he also says, like I said, become an artist. He uses like that colorful language. Become an artist with the intent to change people, not just your teammates, but hopefully you're trying to change your clients as well, or your users. If you have that attitude of I'm building this thing to actually try to change the life of my users, then then you're coming in with the right attitude instead of that attitude of, well, I got my paycheck, I come in for 8 hours and that's it. So focus on, like, the attitude to have is do work with the intent to change people. Again, that's ideal. Maybe it can't be done 100% all the time, but that's kind of like the ideal that you should strive for. He says, this is kind of from the book, a day's work for a day's pay is a bad attitude. He says, today is kind of your only chance to get better. It's like your only chance to do something important, right? So don't just throw that away. Like use this chance to build yourself, again, to make yourself better, to do something that can help other people. And so yeah, like that, a day's work for a day's pay, and that's all. That's just not a great, right? It's not a great attitude to have. And like I said, then you'll get to, the more you do this, you get to choose your projects and the types of gifts you give. You can be it can just be better stuff, more stuff that you care about. The next part is another really important part of this book is the concept of the resistance. And Seth Godin didn't come up with this. I don't know where it originally came from, but it might have came from The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. He talks about it, but it's the exact same thing from The War of Art, which I can talk about later. But Seth Godin says you have this lizard brain, like the oldest part of your brain is designed to like protect you. But like these days, we're not really running from like saber-toothed tigers or anything. The thing that it ends up protecting you from is like sticking your neck out at work, or doing creative things, or starting a blog, or doing change for positive, right? And so a lot of times people are afraid of getting laughed at or made fun of, or whatever it is like that. They're just, people just get scared, and I do too. I absolutely understand that attitude. And what Stephen Pressfield says and what Linchpin says is that's kind of the voice of the resistance. It's that voice that's telling you not to start something, or it's telling you to quit or to give up. That whatever you're doing is scary, and that it's probably not going to work anyway. And so, do whatever you can to avoid the resistance. And so he said, oh, actually, we kind of talked about this in the podcast, but so again, really that resistance is trying to protect you from failure and rejection. So the best ways to avoid this is, well, I guess maybe you can't avoid it, but it's just to jump into it. So we've talked about in the podcast, focus on those micro failures. And so like, just understand that this little piece, like maybe even make your goals smaller. We were talking about, instead of having this big goal of losing 50 pounds in 3 months, say, well, I'm going to lose 50 pounds, or I'm going to lose 3 pounds this week, or 2 pounds, or whatever. Take your pick. I'm going to lose 3 pounds this week. And you might fail during that time, but it hasn't necessarily derailed you. But it's not such a big goal that lizard brain might get scared and like get activated and try to push you off to something else. That's something much more attainable. Like anybody can do it. So again, just focus on those small things. Even if you fail, like if you fail after a week, you can kind of adjust yourself. But yeah, hopefully like it hasn't triggered that resistance. But have that attitude, again, having those smaller goals, but understand that you're going to mess up and understand that it isn't going to be perfect. When I was writing the book for Pack Publishing, I had that feeling a lot. I had that feeling before I ever wrote the book. I had that feeling as I was writing the book, and I was worried. I was like, what are people going to say on Amazon? First of all, I don't even think I have any reviews on Amazon, so I don't even think anybody cared right there. And second of all, I kept focusing on, okay, who cares about the Amazon reviews? Who cares if people read it and don't necessarily like it? I'm going to do my best. I shouldn't say who cares, but I'm going to do my best to write a book that I think would be valuable to me as a student and valuable to the students that I was currently teaching. That was my goal. And I just focused on that endpoint. And I said, once it's done, even if people hate it, at least it's going to be on my resume. So at that point, they can't take that away. And so I tried to focus on, again, I was trying not to like trigger that resistance. I was saying, okay, don't worry about whether it's good or bad. It probably will be bad. Uh, so let's just get it done. Let's just get it done. And we try to do that every day when we're working on the podcast. That's what I'm trying to do, even by practicing talking in front of the camera here as well, trying to do that a little bit more. So realize that it's not going to be perfect and try to do smaller stuff so that it doesn't trigger the resistance. A good thing to do is also to seek out discomfort. And so it's these uncomfortable moments that, like, when you think about doing these uncomfortable things, like, we're not comfortable with doing these uncomfortable things. Obviously, that's why they're uncomfortable. That's when that lizard brain, or that's when the resistance gets triggered, and it stops us from doing it. So if you make it a goal to seek out this discomfort, then hopefully the resistance won't bother you so much. You're going to be doing it more and more. You might actually not get resistance at all. I'm also rereading a book right now called 100 Days of Rejection. And the author, at the start, he was just deathly afraid. He got rejected by a venture capitalist company, and he was just like scared of rejection in all parts of his life. And so he started a blog and he made this goal of getting 100 days of rejection. I'm going to talk about this later, but it was exactly with this attitude going forward. He had this resistance, and so his goal was to make a game out of it, seeking out this discomfort, so that he could get comfortable with that. And then, that is also that's also like a muscle. Like, I don't know. I imagine a circle of your discomfort zone, and stepping out of that zone is like doing a workout. It becomes harder, but the more that you do it, it does strengthen. Now your discomfort zone gets bigger and bigger, so you can actually do more stuff and be comfortable. So if you can get your discomfort zone really big, right? You might be doing stuff that would really shock other people, but if it's not outside of your comfort zone because it's gotten bigger, then the resistance, or your lizard brain, hopefully won't get triggered. I guess the last part is just use the resistance as a guide. And so this is in a couple of Seth Godin's books, but I really like this idea. Um, if you feel that resistance, so if you're kind of, deciding what to do, and there's that one thing that kind of makes you uncomfortable, maybe use that as a guide and go, okay, if that's the thing that's making me uncomfortable, maybe that's the thing that I should do. And this can obviously be tricky. He's not recommending that you do like immoral things. So it's like your moral compass is different than that resistance. But so you'll have to decide that yourself. But if you're afraid to ask your boss for a raise, like maybe you know come up with a good reason why you deserve a raise or not, for example. But like if you think you deserve a raise, come up with the reasons why and ask your boss for a meeting with that. If you have some idea on how to improve your app, but you're afraid to speak out about it, then uh, then maybe that's the thing that you should do. If you think you want to start a blog, or if you think you want to start a podcast, but you're worried that people are going to laugh or nobody's going to watch it anyway, and it makes you uncomfortable, maybe that's that thing that you have to do. And like I said, that's exactly why. That's a big part of the reason why we're doing all of the stuff that we're doing with Kojo and our podcast, and it's the same reason why I'm going to try to start doing more of these videos as well. I think that's basically it. Let me do a quick thing through my notes. Lizard brain, seek out discomfort. Nope, actually, I think that's basically it. So, yeah, definitely check out the book. I'm not necessarily trying to do, I don't like book summaries, even though that ends up being what these are. I don't think me talking about the book is a good substitute for you not reading the book. I like talking about the books that I like, that I've read and I liked. So, yeah, I definitely recommend Linchpin. I'm going to keep talking about Seth Godin books. Next, I will probably be talking about the 100 Days of Rejection. Anyway, so I'll talk with you guys next time.